Hi, I'm Bill Cherry, and I've still got on my sweatshirt that I had on yesterday, which is really today, two times. And I thought of another story, and I wanted to tell it to you. It just take a few minutes. A lot of people know very little about how this latest generation of Galveston has succeeded and how it has gone together. When Mr. Mitchell was uh, asked to buy one of the buildings down there. He agreed to buy one, and he bought the TGF League building, which is on the corner of 23rd and Strand, and he put a French restaurant in there. Now, why it was French, I don't know, since his family were Greek, and he named the restaurant the Wintle Trap, and a Wintle Trap is a Greek conch shell. Didn't know that, did you? And he hired a chef out of Houston, and the guy was really good, and he had a manager that knew how to manage, and it worked, and it was really hot. It was doing good, and he had a piano player in there, and the guy was a good piano player for restaurants. But he ended up with two floors that were above it that had nothing on it, and he had to do something with them. What does he do with them? So I was doing the historical properties in those days, and primarily in houses. And my office was on Broadway, and I called it the Old House Company. And some years later, I sold it to another couple of people, and they didn't like the name the Old House Company, so they called it the House Company. But nevertheless, it did very well for both of us. And so, Mr. Mitchell stopped by one day, and he said, I need some help. And he started telling me what he wanted to do. That he needed to get the stuff leased that was down there, and he was worried about what he was going to do about adding apartments and so forth, so he'd get people living down there, because he understood the concept that if people, not people living there, it's never going to be successful. So I said, well, he said, would you do this for me? I said, I'll do it for you, but on a retainer, and I don't, we have an agreement. And I'm not working for you. I just do it, and if it works out, fine. If it doesn't work out, you can fire me. You can do whatever you want. If I don't want to do it anymore, I can do it, whatever. So that's how we worked, and we worked together for 20 years, and it was a great deal, because we somehow or another like to yell at each other, but nevertheless we loved each other. That's really true. So the first people down there was Dennis Bettison and his group, and they leased the whole east side of the second floor of the building. And boy, that sounded good. And then all of a sudden, we realized that we didn't have a banquet room, so we used the third floor and put a banquet floor up there, and we had all kinds of stuff going on there. So the building was making money. So Mrs. Mitchell decided in the meantime that what ought to happen is we ought to have a hotel down there. That we had a hotel, a small hotel, that it would do very well, and it should be luxurious, and not a lot of rooms, which was not any place going to be with a lot of rooms to begin with. So they came up with the idea of the Tremont house, and I was assigned to go buy 3 buildings that were contingent to each other, so that they could be all 3 turned into the Wintle Trap. Well, the one thing that Mr. Mitchell had sort of a handle on was how to tell something that he was doing before anybody should have known about it. Because I bought all those buildings as trustee, but by the time I had gotten the first one, then we ended up with him telling, well, I'm getting ready to put a hotel in, I'm going to need that one on the car, and this one over here, and so forth. And so, as it turned out, he hired Ford Powell and Carson out of San Antonio, and they came in and they designed the building with how they would put it together. And I had one whale of a time getting all those pieces of property away from those guys that owned them, because they were thinking they were, that was their way to get to the big bank. So anyway, somehow I got it worked out. One of them, the day before Christmas Eve, the fellow that owned Electric Supply, which was one of them, called me on the phone. He said, I really admire your tenacity. He said, come down and let's share some eggnog. So I said, okay. So I go down there, and he's got a quart of eggnog, and he's got some whiskey in a flask of some sort, and he's got a couple of paper cups and some nutmeg to shake on the top of it. And he and I sit there in this shop upstairs, and we drink our drink. And I finally said to him, so I guess it's time for me to go on. He said, well, you don't know why I wanted you here. I said, I thought you wanted me here to have a drink with you. He said, no, I want you to know I'm going to sell the building to you. He said, all you've got to do is find me a building that I can move this shop into. The old C.P. Evans store on 39th and O was for sale and had been for sale. And we could trade it. And he was in hog heaven. The building was big, it was nice, it had lots of room and so forth. So anyway, when it got down to seeing the plans that Ford Powell and Carson had drawn, there were a bunch of us that met in Mr. Mitchell's conference room at the Woodlands. And there were architects, lawyers, Mrs. Mitchell, Nancy Ware, the public relations person, and I would say that there were probably 10 people there. And we looked at the plans and so forth. And he turns to me and he said, well, you're the hotel man. What do we do with this thing? I said, the hotel man? He said, didn't you play in hotels all over the United States before you came over here back home and got everything all together and got your business open? I said, yeah. He said, well, you're bound to know more about hotels than anybody in this room. Go through the thing and see what the world you think of it. The architects went nuts. They were just humiliated. You're trying to tell me that we can't draw plans that are sufficient and good and perfect, and you got to have this guy over here who only does is stay in hotels and play a piano to criticize him. Mr. Mitchell said, that's what I'm telling you. What should we do? Well, he was going to have shops that you had to enter the hotel and turn to the right, and they would all be lined up, and there was not any way to shut the hotel off if those guys wanted to keep their shops open. And the other thing was that another one was that they had designed the kitchen, but they must have never seen kitchen equipment, because if you tried to open the oven door, nobody could pass by you, and you had to stand on the side of it in order to get it open so you get the roast beef out of there or whatever. And then the thing came that Mrs. Mitchell was having custom-made furniture made for those hotel rooms. And I said, how do you know they're going to fit? Oh, man. You know they're going to fit. Why do I know that? Do you know that? Well, I don't know, but we'll make sure they fit. I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what. No matter what, I want to build an exact replica of one of those hotel rooms. And we're going to buy the furniture for that, and we're going to put it in there, and we're going to see how it turns out. None of it was going to work. The furniture was too big. It didn't fit. You couldn't, if you slept on one side of the bed, you had to crawl over your partner on the other side of the bed to get to the bathroom and all that sort of thing. So we built the hotel room, and Mr. Mitchell was screaming at me. I don't want to spend that money on building a hotel room. I said, what's the big deal with it? We can take we're going to make the hotel fit the furniture to begin with. All right, so that furniture can go over there. Meanwhile, we have the hotel room there, and it's really a luxury hotel room, and we can put another bedroom next to it, and we'll have a big fancy rental unit. Okay, that's what we'll do. Every time he'd come to my office after that, he would say, I don't know why we're doing this, but you're the guy. You're supposed to know about hotels. I said, no, that's what you dreamed up. I didn't have anything to do with that. I just play the piano in hotels. So anyway, the story is that they built the hotel, and when they were building the hotel, one of the things they had found was that Mrs. Mitchell was buying some uh, special tile that would go in the bathroom that had lines in it. And so it ended up being maybe there was 6 to a course on each tile on the first one, maybe there were 5 on the next one, 4 on the next one, and so forth. And it was very expensive. And so I insisted they send the tile over there. Well, I didn't do that. I said, send the tile over there. Ms. Mitchell finally stuck her head in and said, send the tile. Yes, sir. So they got the tile over there. And sure enough, if you started laying the course of those things, when it got to the ceiling, you only used about this much of one tile. I said, either lower the ceiling to where it goes to where it sits on top of the tile, the last tile, or raise it so that that tile can become the last tile. But we don't want to end up with the tile we have to cut and throw away 3/4 of the tile so we can make one thing. So anyway, that's how the Tremont house got built. So long ago. But the one with the deserves the most admiration are Bill and Karen Fullen. And Bill was an operator over at Texas City, and at night he had bought some laundromats. He had 3 or 4 of them, I think. And he would come home and service all that stuff. And he knew how to fix the equipment and everything, so he had that all paid for. And then he went and bought that building in the Mensing building, and put the Emporium in there. And I'm telling you, he did really, really good. He really did. And then he did the hamburger thing next door to that. And then he did the Mexican restaurant on the corner with it. And the upstairs he had rented out for apartments. And he did really good with those things. And then he sold them. And he and Karen retired. Not bad. Then there was Joe Flores, of course, with Yahoo. Yeah, is that it? No. Yaga, got it. And it was those T-shirts, all that stuff were wonderful. They really were. He is very talented. So that's the story of the first part of the Strand, and we ended up building. I don't know how many more buildings we renovated. I can't remember. It's been a while now, but nevertheless, it was probably 8 or 10, something like that. And it was fun. If I've talked too long, I apologize. Thanks for being with me. See you next time. I'm Bill Cherry.